On wedding day, he left his pregnant bride for Mistress, but the lawyer's revelation ruined his future. The vintage lace of her grandmother's veil felt heavier than usual as Natalie Dormer adjusted it one final time in the cramped church vestry. Her hands trembled slightly, not from nerves but from excitement. Hidden in her small clutch purse was a pregnancy test she'd taken just 3 days ago, the 2 pink lines still vivid in her memory. She planned to show Nathan after the ceremony, maybe during their first dance. What a perfect wedding gift, she thought, smoothing her hand over her still flat stomach. "You look absolutely radiant, sweetheart," her mother, Carol, whispered as she helped straighten the train of the dress Natalie had spent countless evenings altering herself. Every bead had been hand-sewn, every seam carefully adjusted to save money for other wedding expenses. Through the thin vestry walls, Natalie could hear the gentle murmur of their guests. Friends from Pasadena General Hospital, where she worked double shifts in the ICU, Nathan's colleagues from the car dealership, neighbors from their apartment complex. Modest, hard-working people who had watched their relationship bloom over 4 years. The community hall they'd rented looked beautiful. Natalie had spent months transforming the plain space with DIY decorations, crafting centerpieces from thrift store finds, and stringing lights she'd bought on clearance. Nathan had promised it would be the most beautiful wedding Pasadena has ever seen, and she believed him. "It's 3:15, her maid of honor, Jessica, announced nervously, checking her phone for the 20th time. Should I go check on Nathan?" Natalie's stomach fluttered, but she forced a smile. "He's probably just running late from the barbershop. You know how he is about his hair looking perfect." But 3:15 became 3:30, then 3:45. The pianist had played the processional music 3 times, and guests were beginning to shift uncomfortably in their seats. Carol tried calling Nathan's phone repeatedly, each attempt going straight to voicemail. "Maybe there was an accident?" Jessica suggested, though her voice lacked conviction. At 4:00 p.m., Natalie's phone buzzed with a notification. An unknown number had sent her a video message. Her heart leaped. Maybe Nathan was trying to explain his delay. She opened the video, and her world shattered. There was Nathan, sitting in what looked like the upscale Meridian restaurant downtown, a place they'd driven past countless times but never could afford. He was raising a champagne flute, his hair perfectly styled, wearing the expensive watch she'd given him for his birthday. Across from him sat Lena Heady, the blonde daughter of the construction supply store owner, wearing a designer dress that probably cost more than Natalie's monthly salary. Nathan's voice was clear and confident as he spoke directly to the camera. "You know what they say. Some men choose for love, others choose intelligently. Today I chose my real future, not a mediocre life." Lena giggled, her manicured fingers intertwined with his. "To making the right choice," she purred, and they clinked glasses. The phone slipped from Natalie's numb fingers, clattering on the vestry floor. Her knees buckled, and she collapsed into the wooden chair behind her, her carefully pinned hair coming undone. "Natalie, what is it? What's wrong?" Carol rushed to her daughter's side. Jessica picked up the phone, watched the video, and let out a sharp gasp. Oh my God, Natalie, I'm so sorry." The pregnancy test felt like it was burning a hole in her purse. Natalie's hands went instinctively to her stomach as tears began streaming down her face, ruining the makeup she'd spent an hour perfecting. "He's not coming," she whispered, her voice hollow. He chose someone else." Carol watched the video, her face cycling through confusion, disbelief, and finally, cold fury. That bastard. That absolute bastard. Outside, the guests were growing restless. Someone knocked gently on the vestry door. "Natalie, is everything okay in there?" Jessica looked at her best friend, seeing the devastation in her eyes. "What do you want me to tell them?" Natalie stood slowly, her legs shaking. She walked to the small mirror hanging on the wall and looked at herself, the girl who had worked 60-hour weeks to pay for this day, who had saved every penny, who had believed in a future that was apparently never real. She pulled out the pregnancy test and stared at it one more time before tucking it back into her purse. Nathan would never know about the baby. He had forfeited that right when he chose money over love. "Tell them the truth," she said quietly, surprising herself with the steadiness in her voice. "Tell them Nathan Walsh chose his real future today and it wasn't me." As Jessica opened the vestry door to address the confused guests, Natalie sank back into the chair, one hand protectively over her stomach. The dream she'd built was dead, but something new was growing inside her, something that would be entirely hers. She just didn't know yet that Nathan's intelligent choice would become the most expensive mistake of his life. In a restaurant across town, Nathan raised his glass again, completely unaware that his abandoned bride was carrying his child, and that the financial records of their relationship would one day destroy him in ways he couldn't imagine. It was now June, 3 months since the wedding that never was, and Natalie's life had become a carefully choreographed dance of survival. She stood in the break room of Pasadena General Hospital at 6:47 a.m., forcing down saltine crackers to combat the morning sickness that hit her like clockwork every day. Her scrubs were getting tighter around the waist. At 4 months pregnant, she still had a few weeks before she'd need maternity clothes. Money she didn't have. "Another double shift?" asked Dr. Martinez, the attending physician who had become protective of Natalie since learning about her situation. "That's your 4th this week. Bills don't pay themselves," Natalie replied with a weak smile, checking her phone for the schedule. She had picked up every available shift since Nathan left, working ICU during the day and covering the pediatric ward at night. The exhaustion was bone deep, but it was better than sitting alone in the apartment she could barely afford. The apartment that still smelled like Nathan's cologne near the closet where his clothes used to hang. Her phone buzzed with a text from the wedding venue coordinator. "Final payment of $2,400 due this week or account goes to collections." Natalie closed her eyes and took a deep breath. The wedding debt was entirely in her name. The venue, the flowers, the catering for 120 guests who had watched her humiliation unfold. Nathan hadn't contributed a single dollar to their dream wedding, always promising he'd handle his part when his next commission check came in. "You know, Dr. Martinez said gently, "there are resources for single mothers. Support groups, financial assistance programs." "I'm fine," Natalie cut him off, though they both knew it was a lie. She wasn't fine. She was drowning. But she'd learned early in life that the only person she could rely on was herself. At 2 p.m. during her lunch break, Natalie stopped by the grocery store near the hospital. She was calculating how to stretch $47 until her next paycheck, when she heard a familiar laugh from the next aisle. Nathan's laugh. Her blood ran cold. She peered around the corner, and there he was, pushing a cart with Lena Hetty, both of them dressed like they'd stepped out of a magazine. Nathan wore a tailored navy blazer she'd never seen before, and Lena was in designer jeans that probably cost more than Natalie's monthly food budget. "Babe, should we get the organic steaks?" Lena asked, holding up a package that cost $60. "Daddy's having the Hendersons over for dinner Sunday, and I want to impress them." "Whatever you want, princess," Nathan replied, kissing her cheek. Money's no object anymore. Natalie watched in horrified fascination as they filled their cart with premium everything. Artisanal cheeses, imported wine, fresh lobster tails. The same man who used to complain when she bought name-brand cereal was now casually dropping $300 on a single grocery trip. "Oh, and we need to pick up the dry cleaning for your interview outfit," Lena continued. "Daddy thinks the Henderson construction job is perfect for you. Regional sales manager, company car, full benefits." "Your dad's amazing," Nathan said, squeezing her hand. "I can't believe I wasted so many years in that dead-end life." Dead-end life. That's what he called their 4 years together. Natalie pressed herself against the shelving, praying they wouldn't see her. Her own cart contained generic mac and cheese, store-brand crackers, and the cheapest prenatal vitamins she could find. "I'm just so glad you figured out what you really wanted before it was too late," Lena said, completely oblivious to the devastation her words caused. "Can you imagine if you'd actually married that nurse? You'd be stuck in some tiny apartment forever." Nathan chuckled. "Bullet dodged. Now I know what real love feels like." They moved on, leaving Natalie shaking in the cereal aisle. She abandoned her cart and rushed to the bathroom, where she vomited up the saltines she'd managed to keep down that morning. That evening, back in her apartment, Natalie sat on the couch that Nathan had picked out but never helped pay for, staring at a stack of bills spread across her coffee table. Rent, utilities, medical bills from her prenatal appointments, wedding debt, and Nathan's car payment, which was still in her name because he'd had bad credit. She picked up Nathan's car payment notice, $387 due in 5 days. She'd been making his payments for 2 years, even when he was unemployed for 3 months after getting fired from Henderson Motors for chronic tardiness. He'd promised to pay her back when things turned around. Now things had turned around. For him. Her phone rang. The caller ID showed Peter Dinklage, her family's accountant and longtime friend. At 56, Peter had watched Natalie grow up, had been the one to teach her about budgeting and saving when she'd started working at 16. "Natalie, sweetheart, how are you holding up?" The kindness in his voice almost broke her resolve. "I'm managing, Uncle Peter. Just tired. Your mother told me about the wedding expenses, and I've been thinking about some things." Peter's voice took on a more serious tone. "Do you remember when Nathan borrowed money for his business venture 2 years ago?" Natalie winced. $40,000 that she'd co-signed for, believing Nathan when he said he was going to flip cars and make them financially secure. She'd never seen a single penny of profit. "What about it?" "I kept all the paperwork, Natalie. Every loan document, every bank statement, every payment you made on his behalf. I've been doing your taxes for 10 years. I know exactly how much of your own money went into supporting that man." "Peter, I don't want to think about—" $53,000. Peter interrupted quietly. "That's what I calculate you've paid toward his expenses over the past 4 years. Rent he didn't cover, car payments, loan payments, even grocery bills when he was between jobs." The number hit Natalie like a physical blow. $53,000. Her entire life savings, plus debt she was still carrying. "Why are you telling me this?" Peter was quiet for a moment. "Because that man is driving around in a BMW and eating lobster while you're working yourself to death to pay for a wedding he destroyed. And more importantly, because you're about to be a mother." Natalie's hand went to her stomach, now showing the slightest curve at 14 weeks. "I want you to think about something," Peter continued. "Every payment you make on his debts is money taken away from your child. Every late night shift you work because you can't afford rent is energy you're stealing from yourself and that baby. What choice do I have?" "You have more choices than you think, and when you're ready to explore them, I'll be here." After hanging up, Natalie sat in the growing darkness of her apartment, listening to the couple upstairs arguing about money. Through her thin walls, she could hear Mrs. Chen's television playing the evening news. She pulled out the latest ultrasound photo from her purse. Her baby at 14 weeks, perfectly formed and completely dependent on her. The same day she'd gotten this picture, Nathan had posted on social media from the country club, celebrating Lena's birthday with a party that probably cost more than Natalie made in 2 months. For the first time since the wedding, Natalie allowed herself to feel something other than sadness and shame. She felt anger. Pure, righteous anger at a man who had taken everything from her and given nothing back, who was now living a life of luxury, while she struggled to afford prenatal vitamins. She picked up her phone and scrolled to Nathan's social media. There he was, arms around Lena on a boat, both of them wearing clothes that screamed money. The caption read, "Living our best life with my amazing woman. Sometimes you have to make tough choices to find real happiness. No regrets. Living right." Natalie stared at the hashtag, "No regrets." She touched her belly and whispered to her unborn child, "Your father thinks he has no regrets, but he doesn't know about you yet. And he definitely doesn't know what Uncle Peter has been keeping track of." Outside her window, thunder rumbled in the distance, promising a storm. 3 miles away, Nathan was selecting wine for dinner with Lena's parents, completely unaware that every financial document from his past was organized in Peter Dinklage's filing cabinet, and that the woman he'd abandoned was carrying the child who would change everything. It was September now, 6 months after the abandoned wedding. At 7 months pregnant and showing clearly, Natalie stood in Peter Dinklage's modest accounting office on a rainy Tuesday evening in November. The walls were lined with filing cabinets that had organized the financial lives of working-class Pasadena families for over 20 years. Peter had insisted on meeting after her shift ended, claiming he had something important to show her. "Sit down, sweetheart," Peter said gently, noticing how Natalie's hand pressed against her lower back. Her uniform was clearly maternity scrubs now, and the exhaustion in her eyes had deepened over the past months. "How are you feeling?" "Like a whale," Natalie attempted to joke, settling into the chair across from his desk. "But healthy. The baby's healthy. That's what matters." Peter nodded, but his expression remained serious. He pulled out a thick manila folder and set it between them. "I've been working on something since our last conversation. I need you to see exactly what Nathan Walsh cost you, not just emotionally, but financially." "Peter, I really don't. Please, just listen." He opened the folder, revealing meticulously organized bank statements, receipts, and payment records. "This is your financial life for the past 4 years. Every payment, every deposit, every expense." Natalie's stomach tightened as Peter spread the documents across his desk like a prosecutor presenting evidence. "Let's start with the car," Peter said, pointing to a highlighted payment schedule. "March 2020. Nathan needed to finance a reliable vehicle for work. But because his credit was shot from missed payments on his previous car, you had to co-sign. The down payment? I remember. $3,000 for my emergency fund. Correct. And the monthly payments of $387 for the past 4 years? Peter ran his finger down a column of payments. Every single one came from your account. That's $18,576, not including the down payment. Natalie winced. She had always told herself that Nathan would pay her back once he got back on his feet. Now the apartment, Peter continued, pulling out rental agreements. The lease has always been in your name because Nathan couldn't pass the credit check. Rent, utilities, renter's insurance. He showed her highlighted bank statements. In 4 years of living together, Nathan contributed to exactly 11 months of rent. 11 out of 48 months. He was going through a rough patch. For 3.5 years? Peter's voice was gentle but firm. Natalie, this isn't about judging your choices. This is about protecting your future and your child's future. He pulled out another set of documents. The loan, $40,000 that he claimed was for a car-flipping business. You co-signed because you trusted him. Peter met her eyes. I contacted the bank. Do you know where that money actually went? Natalie shook her head, though she had suspicions she'd never voiced. Online gambling debts, credit card payments from cash advances he'd been hiding, and approximately $8,000 on what the bank records show as entertainment expenses, bars, restaurants, hotels. Peter paused. Some of those hotel charges were on weekends, when he told you he was visiting his brother in San Diego. The office felt like it was spinning. Natalie pressed her hand to her chest, feeling the baby kick as if responding to her distress. You're saying he was cheating back then too? I'm saying the financial records suggest he was living a double life for longer than either of us realized. Peter reached across and squeezed her hand. Natalie, in the 4 years you were with Nathan Walsh, you spent $127,000 supporting him. Car payments, rent, loan payments, credit card minimums when he couldn't cover them, even grocery bills. $127,000? The number felt unreal. Your nursing salary is good, but not enough to cover all that without destroying your own financial security. You depleted your entire savings account, maxed out your credit cards, and took on debt that will follow you for years. Peter's voice cracked slightly. You gave that man everything, and he left you broke and pregnant. Natalie stared at the papers scattered across the desk. The documented proof of 4 years of financial abuse she hadn't even recognized as abuse. What was I supposed to do? I loved him. When someone you love is struggling, there's a difference between helping someone and being systematically drained. Peter interrupted. Look at this. He showed her Nathan's social media posts from the past month, printed out and organized chronologically. Dinner at Mistress, $200 per person. Weekend in Napa Valley, $1,500 at the resort alone. A Rolex watch he posted on Instagram, $8,000. Each image was like a slap in the face. Nathan living lavishly while she worked doubles to afford prenatal appointments. How is he paying for all this? Natalie asked weakly. Lena's family money, and his new job at her father's company. But here's what's interesting. Peter pulled out a credit report. Nathan still has terrible credit because of the debts he defaulted on before you. The car you co-signed for? That's still affecting your credit score. The loan he didn't pay back? That's still your responsibility. So while he's living like a millionaire, I'm destroying your financial future paying for his past mistakes. Peter leaned forward. Natalie, he's driving around in a BMW that Lena's father bought him, while you're still making payments on his old car that's been repossessed and sold at auction, meaning you still owe the difference. The baby gave a particularly strong kick, and Natalie rubbed her belly absently. Even if all this is true, what can I do about it? I co-signed everything willingly. Peter smiled for the first time that evening. That's where you're wrong. Civil court allows for recovery of funds when there's evidence of fraud or misrepresentation. Nathan told you that $40,000 loan was for a business. I have documentation proving it went to gambling debts and personal expenses. That's fraudulent misrepresentation. You think I could actually get some of that money back? I think Nathan Walsh has been living consequence-free for too long, and it's time that changed. Peter gathered the papers into neat stacks. More importantly, your baby deserves a mother who isn't working herself to death to pay for her ex-boyfriend's mistakes. Natalie looked down at her swollen belly, thinking about the nursery she couldn't afford to set up, the crib she'd been saving toward for months. What would I have to do? Let me handle the legal research. There are precedents for cases like this, especially when children are involved. Peter's expression grew determined. That man took your youth, your savings, and your trust. He doesn't get to take your child's future too. As Natalie left Peter's office that night, walking slowly to her 10-year-old Honda in the drizzling rain, she felt something shifting inside her. Not just the baby moving, but something harder and more resolute. She had spent 4 years making excuses for Nathan, covering for him, believing his promises. She had worked herself to exhaustion trying to build a life with someone who was busy planning his exit strategy. But she wasn't just Natalie anymore. She was going to be someone's mother. And that child deserved better than a mother who had been too naive to see she was being robbed blind. Her phone buzzed with a text from her supervisor. "Can you cover an extra shift this weekend?" Jenny called in sick. For the first time in months, Natalie typed back, "Sorry, I need the rest. Doctor's orders." It wasn't true about the doctor, but it should have been. She was 6 months pregnant and working 60-hour weeks to pay for the mistakes of a man who was currently posting Instagram stories from a wine tasting in Santa Barbara. As she drove home through the rain, Natalie made a decision. She was done being Nathan Walsh's victim. It was time to be her child's protector instead. 50 miles north in Santa Barbara, Nathan was laughing at something Lena's father had said over dinner, completely unaware that every financial document from his past 4 years was now organized in a lawyer's filing system, and that the woman he'd left behind was finally ready to fight back. November brought an early chill to Pasadena, and with it, the growing pressure on Nathan Walsh's carefully constructed new life. 8 months had passed since he'd abandoned Natalie, and his silk tie in the mirror of the executive bathroom at Heedy Construction Supply, admiring the way his new Armani suit fit his frame. 6 months as regional sales manager had transformed him from a struggling used car salesman into what he considered his true self, a successful businessman who belonged in boardrooms and country clubs. "Looking sharp, son," came the voice of Robert Heedy, Lena's father, as he entered the bathroom. At 62, Robert was everything Nathan aspired to be: wealthy, respected, commanding. "Ready for the Henderson meeting?" "Absolutely, Mr. Heady. I've been preparing all week." Nathan straightened his shoulders, trying to project confidence he didn't entirely feel. The Henderson construction account would be worth $2 million annually, and Robert had made it clear that landing this deal would secure Nathan's position in the company and in the family. "Good. Because between you and me," Robert lowered his voice conspiratorially, "I'm thinking about expanding your role. Vice President of Regional Development has a nice ring to it, doesn't it?" Nathan's pulse quickened. VP meant a corner office, company stock options, and a salary that would put him firmly in Pasadena's upper class. "I won't let you down, sir. I know you won't. That's why I'm glad Lena found someone with real ambition instead of settling for some ordinary life." 3 hours later, Nathan sat across from Jim Henderson and his business partners in the conference room, his confidence evaporating with each passing minute. The Henderson Group wasn't just successful, they were thorough. Their questions about supply chain management, bulk pricing strategies, and long-term market forecasting exposed gaps in Nathan's knowledge that his charm couldn't cover. "So, Mr. Walsh," Henderson said, reviewing Nathan's proposal, "your background shows mostly automotive sales. How does that translate to construction supply logistics?" Nathan felt sweat forming under his expensive shirt. "Well, selling is selling, right? Understanding customer needs, building relationships." "Actually," interrupted Henderson's CFO, "construction supply requires understanding material specs, delivery schedules, seasonal demand fluctuations. It's quite different from moving cars off a lot." The room fell silent except for the scratching of pens as Henderson's team made notes. Nathan could see Robert's jaw tightening at the head of the table. "We'll be in touch," Henderson said politely. But Nathan recognized the dismissive tone he'd heard countless times in his car sales days. After the Henderson Group left, Robert's demeanor was ice cold. "My office, now." Nathan followed his future father-in-law down the hallway, past framed photos of Robert receiving business awards and shaking hands with city officials. In the plush corner office, Robert closed the door with deliberate control. "What the hell was that?" Robert's voice was quiet but deadly. "I can fix this, Mr. Heady. If I could just get another meeting." "Another meeting?" Robert's voice rose. "You just cost me the biggest deal of the quarter because you thought selling is selling? Do you have any idea how long I've been cultivating that relationship?" Nathan's throat felt dry. "I'm still learning the industry." "You're 34 years old, Nathan. This isn't an entry-level position. I hired you because Lena insisted you were ambitious and capable. Robert moved to stand behind his massive desk. But what I'm seeing is someone who thinks a nice suit and a firm handshake can replace actual competence. Give me another chance. I'll study, You'll what? Learn an entire industry overnight? Robert sat down heavily. My daughter deserves a man who can stand on his own, not someone who needs constant hand-holding. The drive home to Lena's condo was excruciating. Nathan rehearsed different ways to explain the meeting, but every version made him sound incompetent. The BMW, a welcome gift from Robert, felt like it was mocking him as he pulled into the parking garage of the luxury complex he could never afford on his own. Lena was waiting in the kitchen, already dressed for dinner at the country club. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled, and she wore a dress that cost more than Nathan used to make in a month. "How did it go, baby?" she asked, moving to kiss his cheek. "Daddy said the Henderson deal could set us up beautifully." Nathan loosened his tie, avoiding her eyes. "It was challenging." "Challenging how?" Lena's voice sharpened slightly. She had inherited her father's instinct for business problems. "They asked some technical questions I wasn't prepared for. But it's fine, I can—" "What kind of technical questions?" Lena pulled back, studying his face. "Nathan, this was supposed to be a slam dunk. Daddy specifically said you were ready for this level of responsibility." I know. It's just—" Nathan ran his hands through his hair, suddenly feeling exhausted. "Maybe I need more time to learn the business before taking on accounts this big." Lena's expression shifted from concern to something cooler. "More time? You've been there 6 months. How much more time do you need?" "Look, I know I disappointed your father today, but—" "You disappointed me too," Lena interrupted. "Do you understand what this looks like? I convinced Daddy to hire you. I vouched for your abilities, and now you're saying you're not ready for the job you already have?" Nathan sank onto the leather couch that Lena had picked out. "I'm doing my best here. Are you?" Lena remained standing, her arms crossed. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're comfortable letting my family carry you." The words hit Nathan like ice water. "That's not fair. I work hard, at a job my father gave you, living in a condo I pay for, driving a car my father bought." Lena's voice grew more pointed with each word. "What exactly are you contributing to this relationship besides showing up?" Nathan stared at her, recognizing something familiar in her tone. The same frustration Natalie used to get when he'd been unemployed for months. The same edge that appeared when bills were overdue and promises weren't kept. "I left everything behind for you," he said quietly. "You left what behind? A job selling used cars and an apartment you couldn't afford?" Lena shook her head. "Nathan, I thought I was getting a man with ambition, not someone who needed to be rescued." "So what are you saying?" Lena was quiet for a long moment, staring out the floor-to-ceiling windows at the city lights below. "I'm saying maybe we both need to re-evaluate what we want." That night, Nathan lay awake in the king-sized bed, staring at the ceiling while Lena slept with her back turned to him. Her words echoed in his mind. "What exactly are you contributing?" He thought about Natalie, working double shifts at the hospital, never questioning when he lost jobs or couldn't make rent. She had supported him without making him feel like a failure, had believed in him even when he didn't believe in himself. But Natalie was his past, a past he'd deliberately chosen to leave behind for this supposedly better life. Except now this better life was demanding things from him that he wasn't sure he could deliver. His phone buzzed with a notification. Without thinking, he opened social media and scrolled until he found Natalie's profile. She rarely posted, but there was a new photo from 2 days ago. Her in hospital scrubs, visibly pregnant, smiling tiredly at the camera. The caption read, 28 weeks and still going strong. This little one is worth every challenge. Nathan stared at the photo for a long time. Pregnant. The timeline meant it had to be his. He thought about messaging her, but what would he say? That his new life wasn't as perfect as he'd thought? That maybe he'd made a mistake? But then he looked around the luxury condo, at the designer clothes in the walk-in closet, at the lifestyle he'd dreamed of for years. He couldn't go back to being ordinary. He wouldn't. He deleted the notification and put his phone away, but sleep didn't come. Outside, Pasadena sprawled below him, including the modest neighborhood where Natalie was probably lying awake too, planning for a baby he would never acknowledge. Nathan closed his eyes and tried to forget the photo, tried to forget the growing certainty that he'd traded something real for something that was beginning to feel like an expensive illusion. But some truths, once seen, couldn't be unseen. 20 miles away, Natalie was indeed awake, feeling her baby kick as she reviewed the legal documents Peter had prepared. She had no idea that the father of her child was lying in a luxury condo, finally beginning to understand the true cost of his choices. By December, as Pasadena entered the holiday season, Natalie was in her final weeks of pregnancy. At 36 weeks, she was finally starting maternity leave, and every movement was deliberate and careful, but there was a lightness in her step that hadn't been there in months. Yesterday, she'd finally paid off the last of the wedding venue debt, and next week she'd start her maternity leave. Peter Dinklage stood at her door on this cold December morning, holding a manila envelope and wearing the satisfied expression of a man who just completed a masterpiece. "It's time," he said simply. Natalie led him to her small dining table, where he spread out legal documents with the precision of a surgeon laying out instruments. "The civil suit is ready to file," Peter announced. "Recovery of fraudulently obtained funds, misrepresentation of loan purposes, and unpaid co-signed debts. We're asking for full restitution of $127,000 plus interest, legal fees, and damages." Natalie's hand went to her belly as the baby gave a strong kick. "And you really think we have a chance?" "I think we have a bulletproof case." Peter pulled out a thick folder. Bank records showing the gambling transactions, hotel receipts from weekends he claimed to be visiting family, even text messages you saved where he promised to pay you back when his big break came. Plus, Peter smiled grimly, "I hired a private investigator to document his current lifestyle." He showed her printed photos. Nathan at expensive restaurants, shopping at high-end stores, vacation pictures from social media. Each image was time-stamped and dated, showing a pattern of lavish spending while his debts to Natalie remained unpaid. "The most important thing," Peter continued, "is that we're not just asking for money back. We're asking for child support. Once paternity is established, Nathan will be legally responsible for this baby, whether he acknowledges it or not. She's due in just 4 weeks. He doesn't even know about the baby. He's about to." Peter handed her a court summons. "This gets served to him tomorrow at his workplace. By law, we have to include notification of the pregnancy and paternity claim." Natalie stared at the legal document that would shatter Nathan's carefully constructed new life. Part of her felt guilty, the part that had loved him for 4 years, that had made excuses for his failures, and believed in his potential. But then the baby kicked again, and she thought about the nursery she'd set up in her bedroom closet, about meeting her daughter in just a few weeks. She thought about the second-hand crib, and the generic baby clothes she'd bought on clearance while Nathan posted photos of $1,000 dinners. "Do it," she said firmly. The next morning, Nathan was reviewing sales reports in his glass-walled office at Heady Construction when the process server arrived. Through the window, he could see Robert in a meeting with potential investors, men whose opinions could make or break Nathan's precarious position in the company. "Nathan Walsh?" The server was professional but loud enough that nearby employees looked up from their desks. "Yes? You're being served with a civil lawsuit. Have a good day." Nathan's hands shook as he opened the envelope. The words seemed to blur together. Fraudulent misrepresentation, recovery of funds, paternity claim, child support obligations, paternity claim. His legs gave out and he collapsed into his chair. Natalie was pregnant, and according to the dates listed, he was the father. The baby was due in 4 weeks. "Nathan?" His secretary's voice came through the intercom. "Mr. Hetty wants to see you in his office." Nathan's blood turned to ice. Robert's meeting with the investors was supposed to last all morning. If he was calling Nathan now, it meant someone had told him about the process server. Nathan walked down the hallway on unsteady legs, passing curious colleagues who had witnessed the spectacle. In Robert's office, the older man was alone, the investors apparently dismissed early. "Close the door," Robert said without looking up from the legal papers that were spread across his desk. Nathan realized with horror that Robert had somehow gotten copies of the court documents. "Sit down." Robert's voice was deadly calm. "I want you to explain to me why my company's regional sales manager is being sued for over $100,000 in fraudulent debts." "Mr. Hetty, I can explain. You can explain how you co-signed loans under false pretenses, how you left a pregnant woman to pay your gambling debts." Robert's voice rose steadily. "How you've been living a lie since the day you walked into my daughter's life. It's not what it looks like. It looks like you're a con artist who saw my daughter as a meal ticket." Robert stood up, his face flushed with anger. A man who abandons pregnant women and defrauds the people who trust him. Nathan felt his carefully constructed world crumbling around him. "Lena knows about my past. We've moved beyond—" "Does Lena know you left your pregnant ex-fiancé on your wedding day?" Does she know you've been dodging child support for a baby that's due in 4 weeks? Robert slammed his hand on the desk. Does she know the man she's planning to marry is being sued for fraud? I never told Natalie I would support any baby. Because you didn't know there was a baby, you coward. Robert's composure finally cracked. You ran away like a child and now you're surprised there are consequences? Nathan tried to speak, but Robert held up his hand. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to clean out your office today. Your employment with Hetty Construction is terminated effective immediately. Sir, please, if you'll just let me. I'm not finished. Robert's voice dropped to a whisper. You're also going to tell my daughter the truth about who you really are. All of it. Because if she finds out from someone else, there will be consequences you can't imagine. Nathan felt like he was drowning. Mr. Hetty, I understand you're upset, but… Upset? Robert laughed bitterly. I'm disgusted. I brought you into my family, into my business, and you've been lying from day one. The background check I should have run is sitting right here. He tapped the legal papers. A 4-year history of financial irresponsibility and fraud. What background check? The one I'm running now, you idiot. The one that shows you've been fired from 6 different car dealerships for absenteeism and poor performance. The one that shows you defaulted on 3 different credit cards and had 2 cars repossessed. Robert stood up. The one that shows the only thing you've ever been successful at is finding women to support you. Nathan's mouth opened and closed like a fish, gasping for air. You have 1 hour to pack your things and get out of my building. Security will escort you to your car. Robert moved toward the door. And Nathan? The BMW stays here. It's a company car. As Nathan walked through the office under the watchful eyes of security, collecting his personal items in a cardboard box, he could feel the stares of his former colleagues. His corner office with the view of the San Gabriel Mountains, his secretary, his business cards with the title, Regional Sales Manager, all of it was gone in the span of 30 minutes. In the parking garage, he handed over the BMW keys and climbed into an Uber, the court papers crumpled in his jacket pocket. He had to go home and tell Lena that everything she thought she knew about him was a lie. But first he pulled out his phone and stared at Natalie's contact information, which he'd never deleted. His finger hovered over the call button. 6 weeks. He was going to be a father in 6 weeks, and he'd been too much of a coward to even acknowledge it. The Uber driver glanced in the rearview mirror. Rough day at work? Nathan looked out the window at the city where he'd thought he'd finally made it, where he'd thought he'd escaped the consequences of his choices. You have no idea, he whispered. Across town, Natalie was eating lunch at the hospital cafeteria when her phone rang. Peter's voice was triumphant. It's done. He's been served. And according to my contact at the courthouse, his world is about to get very interesting. It was mid-December, and the winter cold seemed to match Nathan's mood as he stood outside Lena's luxury condo building for 20 minutes, holding the crumpled court papers and trying to find the courage to go upstairs. The February wind cut through his expensive suit, a suit he could no longer afford, bought with a company credit card that had already been canceled. When he finally entered the penthouse, Lena was pacing the living room with her phone pressed to her ear, her face flushed with anger. I don't care what the investors say, Daddy, there has to be some explanation. She stopped mid-sentence when she saw Nathan. I'll call you back. Nathan had never seen Lena look at him with such cold fury. Her perfectly manicured hand was shaking as she set down her phone. Is it true? Her voice was deadly quiet. Lena, I can explain. Is it true? She screamed, her composure finally shattering. Did you abandon a pregnant woman on your wedding day to be with me? Nathan's shoulders sagged. Yes, but… Pregnant? Lena threw her phone onto the couch. You told me she was just some needy ex who couldn't let go. You said you broke up months before we got together. I didn't know she was pregnant when I left. You didn't know? Lena's voice cracked with disbelief. The baby is due in 6 weeks, Nathan. 6 weeks. That means she was pregnant at our engagement party. Nathan tried to step closer, but Lena backed away from him like he was contaminated. When you were posting about choosing your real future, when you were bragging about making intelligent choices, Lena's voice broke. There was a pregnant woman paying for your wedding flowers with money from her emergency fund? How do you know about… Because Daddy had his lawyer review the entire lawsuit. Lena's tears were mixing with her mascara, creating dark streaks down her face. $127,000, Nathan. She spent her life savings keeping you afloat while you were planning to leave her. Nathan's legs felt weak. He sank onto the white leather couch that Lena had picked out, the same couch where they'd planned their future together just days ago. The gambling debts, Lena continued, her voice getting higher with each revelation. The car payments, the rent. She paid for everything while you pretended to be successful enough to date me. I never lied about loving you. You lied about everything else. Lena grabbed the lawsuit papers from the coffee table. It says here you were fired from 6 different jobs for poor performance. 6. You told me you left those jobs for better opportunities. Nathan buried his face in his hands. I was trying to protect you from what? The truth? Lena's voice was raw with betrayal. You were protecting yourself, you coward. You saw a rich girl and you thought you hit the jackpot. That's not fair. What's not fair is that I defended you to my father. Lena threw the papers at Nathan, the sheets scattering across the floor. What's not fair is that I convinced him to hire you when his instincts told him you weren't qualified. Nathan looked up at her, seeing his future disappearing with each word. Lena, please. We can work through this. Work through what? The fact that you're going to be paying child support for the next 18 years? The fact that you committed fraud? The fact that my father's business reputation is damaged because he hired a con artist? I'm not a con artist. Then what do you call taking $40,000 under false pretenses? What do you call letting a woman support you for 4 years while you planned your escape? Lena wiped her face with the back of her hand, smearing her makeup further. What do you call seducing me while you had a pregnant fiancée at home? Nathan stood up, desperation making his voice crack. I love you, Lena. Whatever mistakes I made before, they don't change how I feel about you. Lena stared at him with something that looked like pity mixed with disgust. You don't love me, Nathan. You love what I represent. You love my father's money, my family's status, the life I could give you. That's not true. Prove it. Lena crossed her arms. Walk away from all of this. Give up the lifestyle, move into a normal apartment, get a regular job, and be with me for me. Nathan's mouth opened, but no words came out. The thought of going back to his old life, of starting over with nothing, of losing everything he'd gained. I thought so, Lena said quietly. You can't even pretend to consider it. She walked to the window, looking out at the city lights that had once seemed to promise them everything. I keep thinking about that poor woman working double shifts while she was pregnant, paying your debts while you were taking me to expensive dinners. Natalie chose to do those things. Because she loved you. Lena spun around, her eyes blazing. Because she believed in you. And you repaid her by abandoning her in the worst moment of her life. Nathan felt something breaking inside him. The last vestiges of the narrative he'd built to justify his choices. I thought I was choosing a better life. You chose the easier life, Lena corrected. You chose to be a parasite instead of a partner. The words hung in the air between them like a physical blow. Nathan realized that Lena had just described exactly what he was, what he'd always been. Someone who took from others without giving back. Someone who looked for the path of least resistance. Someone who ran when things got difficult. I need you to leave, Lena said quietly. Lena, please. I need you to pack your things and leave tonight. Her voice was steady now, resolved. I'll have Daddy's lawyer contact you about the timeline for moving out completely. Nathan looked around the penthouse that had been his sanctuary, his proof that he'd finally made it. The designer furniture, the view of the San Gabriel Mountains, the kitchen where he'd learned to appreciate expensive wine. All of it was disappearing like a mirage. Where am I supposed to go? Lena's expression didn't soften. I don't know, Nathan. Maybe you should have thought about that before you destroyed your life and everyone else's. As Nathan packed his belongings into the same suitcase he'd brought when he moved in, Lena sat on the bed they'd shared, watching him with dead eyes. I keep wondering, she said as he folded the shirts she'd bought him, if anything about us was real, or if you were just playing a role you thought I wanted to see. Nathan paused in his packing. The truth was he wasn't sure anymore either. Had he ever really loved Lena, or had he just loved the life she represented? Had he ever been capable of love, or was he just good at mimicking what he thought it should look like? For what it's worth, he said quietly, I thought I was happy with you. Happiness built on lies isn't happiness, Nathan. It's just elaborate self-deception. As Nathan dragged his suitcase toward the door, Lena called after him one last time. That baby you're going to have. Her voice was softer now, almost gentle. Don't do to that child what you did to me and to her mother. Don't make them pay for your inability to be honest. Nathan paused at the door, his hand on the handle. I don't know how to be different. Then learn, Lena said, before you destroy another life. The elevator ride down to the lobby felt like descending from heaven into purgatory. Nathan stood in the marble foyer with his single suitcase, looking out at a city where he suddenly had no place to belong. His phone buzzed with a text message. For a wild moment, he hoped it might be Lena saying she'd changed her mind. Instead, it was from an unknown number. "This is Natalie. We need to talk about the baby, and about what you owe me." Nathan stared at the message for a long time. Tomorrow he would have to face the woman he'd abandoned, the child he'd never acknowledged, and the debt that would follow him for years to come. Tonight, he would sleep in a cheap motel and figure out how to rebuild a life from absolutely nothing. For the first time in years, Nathan Walsh was completely on his own. In her small apartment across town, Natalie sat in the nursery she'd set up in her closet, folding tiny clothes and feeling her daughter kick. She had no idea that the man who had abandoned her was, at that very moment, learning the true cost of his choices. Nathan sat in the cramped booth of a 24-hour diner near the interstate, staring at Natalie across the worn Formica table. At 34 weeks pregnant, she moved carefully, but there was a steel in her eyes that he'd never seen before. Peter Dinklage sat beside her, a briefcase full of documents serving as silent testimony to Nathan's failures. "You look different," Nathan said awkwardly, gesturing toward her obvious pregnancy. "I am different," Natalie replied coolly. "I'm about to be a mother, and mothers protect their children." The words hit Nathan like a physical blow. He'd spent the last 3 sleepless nights in a motel room, trying to figure out how to salvage something from the wreckage of his life. Seeing Natalie, seeing the visible proof of the child he'd never acknowledged, made it impossible to pretend any longer. "I didn't know," he began. "You didn't want to know," Peter interrupted, opening his briefcase. "Just like you didn't want to know that gambling away $40,000 would have consequences. Just like you didn't want to know that abandoning someone at the altar would catch up with you." Nathan's phone had been buzzing all morning with notifications he'd been afraid to check. Now, as Natalie and Peter laid out their demands, he glanced at the screen and felt his remaining hope crumble. The notifications were from social media. Tags, comments, shares. Someone had leaked the story. "Problem?" Natalie asked, noticing his distraction. Nathan showed them his phone. The top notification was from the Pasadena Community Facebook group. Local woman shares her story. Abandoned, pregnant at the altar, now fighting for justice. The post had over 300 comments and had been shared dozens of times. Peter leaned over to read the screen, then looked at Natalie with surprise. "Did you post this?" "No," Natalie said quietly, "but I know who did." Meanwhile, across town, Lena Headey was discovering that being the daughter of a prominent businessman came with unwanted scrutiny. She sat in her father's office at Headey Construction, watching him pace behind his desk while his phone rang constantly. "The Henderson Group wants to meet about the ethical concerns surrounding our company," Robert said, his face red with frustration. "3 other clients have called asking about our hiring practices and whether we do proper background checks." Lena's stomach churned. "Daddy, I'm sorry." "Sorry doesn't fix this, Lena." Robert stopped pacing and looked at his daughter with disappointment. "Half of Pasadena is talking about how my daughter was dating a man who abandoned his pregnant fiancée. The other half is wondering what kind of businessman I am that I'd hire someone like that." "I didn't know." "You didn't want to know." Robert's voice echoed through the office. "I tried to warn you that something seemed off about him, but you were so infatuated with the idea of reforming him that you wouldn't listen." Lena's phone buzzed with another notification. The Facebook post about Natalie's story had gained momentum throughout the morning, and now local news outlets were picking it up. Someone had leaked photos from her and Nathan's social media, images of them at expensive restaurants and country club events, juxtaposed with the timeline of Natalie's pregnancy. The comments were devastating, disgusting. While that poor woman was working double shifts pregnant, this woman was posting pictures of $200 dinners. Rich girl thinks she can steal someone else's man and there won't be consequences. She knew he left someone at the altar and didn't care as long as he looked good on her arm. Daddy's money can't buy you a conscience. This is getting worse, Lena said, scrolling through the increasingly hostile comments. People are calling me a homewrecker. Robert snatched her phone and read the comments himself, his jaw tightening with each swipe. That's because you are one, Lena. You may not have known about the pregnancy, but you knew he left someone on their wedding day and you celebrated it. The memory hit Lena like ice water. She had celebrated. When Nathan told her he'd chosen intelligence over mediocrity, she'd felt victorious. When he'd said he was done living beneath his potential, she'd felt chosen, special. I thought she was just ordinary, Lena whispered. Ordinary? Robert's voice was incredulous. She's a nurse, Lena. She saves lives for a living while you shop and post Instagram pictures. That's not fair. What's not fair is that a pregnant woman had to work overtime to pay for a wedding to a man who was already planning to leave her for you. Robert slammed Lena's phone down on his desk. What's not fair is that my business reputation is suffering because my daughter has the moral compass of a spoiled child. Back at the diner, Nathan was learning the full extent of his legal obligations. Peter had laid out a payment plan that would consume most of any future income Nathan might manage to earn. You'll pay child support until the baby turns 18, Peter explained, plus the $127,000 in restitution, plus interest, plus legal fees. Even if you file for bankruptcy, child support obligations can't be discharged. I don't have a job anymore, Nathan said weakly. Then you'd better find one, Natalie replied, because this baby is coming whether you're ready or not. Nathan looked at the woman he'd abandoned, really looked at her for the first time. Her face was rounder from pregnancy, but her eyes held a strength he'd never appreciated when they were together. This was the same woman who had worked double shifts to support his dreams, who had believed in him when he couldn't keep a job, who had loved him unconditionally, and he had thrown it all away for what? A life that had crumbled the moment it was tested? What do you want from me? He asked. I want you to take responsibility, Natalie said simply. For once in your life, I want you to face the consequences of your choices instead of running away or finding someone else to fix them for you. Nathan's phone buzzed again. This time it was a call from his mother who lived in Arizona and rarely contacted him. The social media story had apparently spread beyond Pasadena. He declined the call, but the voicemail notification appeared immediately. Against his better judgment, he played it on speaker. Nathan, honey, your Aunt Susan just sent me some article about you online. Please tell me this isn't true. Please tell me you didn't abandon a pregnant woman to chase after some rich girl. Call me back. Your father and I need to understand what's happening. The shame was overwhelming. His own mother had found out about his failures through social media gossip. Meanwhile, Lena was dealing with her own family crisis. Her mother, Margaret, had driven over from Newport Beach after seeing the news coverage. I raised you better than this, Lena, Margaret said, her voice tight with disappointment. We gave you every advantage, every opportunity, and this is how you use it? To steal some other woman's fiancé? I didn't steal him, Mom. He chose me. He used you, Margaret corrected. And you let him because you were flattered that someone would choose you over someone else. You've always needed to feel superior, haven't you? The words stung because they were true. Lena had felt superior to Natalie from the moment Nathan described her as ordinary. She had felt chosen, special, better than the woman who couldn't keep her man. Now the entire community was seeing her for what she really was, a privileged girl who had helped destroy a family without caring about the consequences. The country club is asking us to consider taking a break from events, Robert announced as he returned to his office. Apparently several members have complained about our family's moral character. Daddy, please. And the charity board asked for your resignation from the hospital fundraiser committee. They don't want someone associated with breaking up families representing their organization. Lena felt her carefully constructed social life crumbling around her. The same society connections that had made her feel important were now rejecting her. The same people who had envied her relationship with Nathan were now gossiping about her moral failures. Her phone rang. It was her best friend Amanda, someone she'd known since prep school. Lena, girl, you need to do damage control, Amanda said without preamble. Everyone is talking about you and that guy. The story is everywhere. It's not as bad as it looks. It's worse, Amanda interrupted, because now people are digging into everything. They found pictures of you two at the country club from the same week that woman was working double shifts pregnant. It looks calculated, Lena. It looks like you knowingly helped a man abandon his pregnant fiancée. I didn't know she was pregnant, but you knew he left someone at the altar and you posted about it like it was romantic. Sometimes love means making tough choices, Amanda quoted from Lena's old social media post. That post has been screenshot and shared hundreds of times. Lena remembered that post. She'd been so proud of Nathan for choosing her, so confident that they were meant to be together. What should I do? Lena asked. Honestly, disappear for a while. This is going to follow you everywhere in Pasadena. Every time someone sees you, they're going to think about that pregnant woman working nights while you were posting pictures of expensive dinners. After hanging up, Lena sat in her penthouse looking out at the city where she'd grown up, where she'd been someone important, someone respected. Now she was just another rich girl who had helped destroy someone's life for her own entertainment. The truth was spreading through Pasadena like wildfire, and there was no way to contain it. Nathan's choices had consequences that reached far beyond just him, and now everyone was paying the price. everyone except Natalie, who was finally getting the justice she deserved. As the sun set over Pasadena, 3 lives hung in the balance. Nathan, in a cheap motel room, calculating how many years it would take to pay off his debts. Lena, in her luxury condo, watching her social standing crumble in real time. And Natalie in her small apartment, feeling her daughter kick as she prepared for the fight of her life. Late January brought no relief for Nathan and Lena. 3 weeks had passed since the story broke, and Nathan Walsh was learning that in a city like Pasadena, reputation was everything. He sat in the waiting room of his 5th potential employer that week, filling out an application for a sales position at a struggling used car lot on the outskirts of town. Nathan Walsh, the manager, a weathered man named Tony, emerged from his office holding Nathan's application. "Come on back." Nathan followed him into the cramped office, trying to project confidence despite wearing his only remaining suit, now wrinkled from repeated interviews and nights in cheap motels. "So," Tony said, settling behind his desk, "I gotta ask, you're the guy from the news, right? The one who left his pregnant girlfriend for the rich girl?" Nathan's heart sank. Even here, 20 miles from Pasadena proper, his story had followed him. It's complicated." "Complicated how?" Tony leaned back in his chair. "See, here's the thing. I run a family business. Most of my customers are working folks, decent people who save up to buy a reliable car. They see someone on the news who abandons pregnant women. They're not going to trust that guy to sell them a car. I have extensive sales experience. I'm sure you do. But experience don't mean much if customers won't work with you." Tony handed the application back to Nathan. "Sorry, son. Wish I could help, but I can't afford to lose business over this." As Nathan walked back to his current motel, a step down from the previous week's accommodations, his phone buzzed with a text from his court-appointed mediator. "First child support payment of $800 due Monday. Restitution payment schedule begins next month. Do you have employment to report? $800 a month." And he couldn't even get hired at a used car lot. Meanwhile, Lena Headey was discovering that money couldn't buy back a reputation. She stood in the produce section of Whole Foods, the same store where she'd once shopped carelessly, and felt the weight of judgmental stares from other customers. "Isn't that the Headey girl?" she heard a woman whisper to her friend near the organic apples. "The one who was dating that man who abandoned his pregnant fiancée?" "Disgusting," the friend replied, not bothering to lower her voice. "I heard she knew he left someone at the altar and didn't care." Lena pretended to examine avocados while the conversation continued behind her. "My sister works at the hospital where the pregnant woman is. Says she's the sweetest thing. Worked double shifts her whole pregnancy to pay for a wedding that never happened. And that rich girl was posting pictures of champagne dinners while the poor woman was eating crackers for morning sickness." Lena abandoned her cart and hurried toward the exit, but the whispers seemed to follow her through the store. At the checkout line, the young cashier, a girl who looked to be in college, gave her a look of open disgust. "Have a day," the cashier said coldly, pointedly leaving out the word nice. Outside in the parking lot, Lena sat in her Mercedes with shaking hands. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through the latest comments on the news articles about her. They hadn't gotten better. "Karma is coming for this princess, watch. Rich girl thought she was too good for consequences. Wrong. I hope she thinks about that pregnant woman every time she looks in the mirror. Daddy's money can't buy back your soul, honey." The worst part was that some of the comments came from people she knew, acquaintances from the country club, former classmates, even people she'd considered friends. At Pasadena General Hospital, Natalie was in her final days before giving birth, and the support from her colleagues had been overwhelming. The nursing staff had organized a baby shower, complete with a crib, car seat, and enough baby clothes to last months. "You don't have to do all this," Natalie said, tearful as she opened gifts in the break room. "Are you kidding?" said Maria, the head of pediatric nursing. "Half of Pasadena has been following your story. People want to help." "Doctor." Martinez approached with an envelope. "This is from the hospital's Employee Assistance Fund. It should cover your maternity leave expenses." Natalie opened the envelope to find a check for $5,000. More money than she'd been able to save in months. "I can't accept this." "You absolutely can," Dr. Martinez interrupted. "You've worked here for 6 years, covering every shift nobody else wanted, helping train new nurses, staying late without complaint. Now it's our turn to help you. Plus," added Jessica, Natalie's former maid of honor who had become her fiercest supporter, The GoFundMe I set up for your legal expenses is up to $15,000. People are really angry about what happened to you. Natalie touched her belly, feeling the baby respond to her elevated emotions. For the first time in months, she felt something she'd almost forgotten: hope. That evening, Nathan sat in a McDonald's near his motel, nursing a coffee and trying to make his remaining $23 last until he could find work. His phone rang, a number he didn't recognize. Hello? Nathan Walsh? This is Rebecca Lawson from Channel 7 News. I'm doing a follow-up story on the Pasadena wedding abandonment case. Would you like to comment? Nathan's blood went cold. No comment. We've been trying to reach you for an interview. Many people are wondering if you have any message for your former fiancée, especially now that she's about to give birth any day. Nathan hung up abruptly, but the call had reminded him of something he'd been trying to forget. Natalie could give birth any moment now. He was about to become a father, and he hadn't even acknowledged the pregnancy publicly. His phone buzzed with a text from his mother. Your cousin Jamie saw you on the news. The whole family is talking. Your father won't even say your name. What have you done to yourself? Across town, Lena was dealing with her own family crisis. She sat across from her parents in their formal dining room, the same room where she'd brought Nathan for Sunday dinners, where she'd planned to announce their engagement. The board voted, Robert said quietly. I'm stepping down as president of the Chamber of Commerce. Daddy, no. They didn't ask me to. I volunteered. Robert's voice was tired, aged. Because every meeting, every event, people whisper about my daughter's involvement in that mess. I can't represent Pasadena business interests when my own family's judgment is being questioned. Margaret set down her wine glass with trembling fingers. The ladies' auxiliary asked me to resign from the hospital gala committee. 23 years of service. And they asked me to resign because of the optics. I'm sorry, Lena whispered. I never meant for you to suffer. Suffer? Robert's composure cracked. Lena, do you understand what you've done? Not just to that poor woman, but to our family's reputation? To our business? I thought I loved him. You loved the idea of taking something away from someone else, Margaret said with unusual sharpness. You've always been that way, even as a child. You wanted toys more when other children were playing with them. The truth in her mother's words hit Lena like a physical blow. Had she wanted Nathan more because he belonged to someone else? Had she been so competitive, so used to getting everything she wanted, that she'd never considered the human cost? The Hendersons canceled their contract today, Robert continued. $2 million in annual business gone. They said they couldn't work with a company whose family values don't align with their corporate ethics. Other clients will come, will they? Robert stood up from the table. Would you hire a company whose owner raised a daughter who helped destroy a pregnant woman's life? Would you trust our judgment about anything? That night, Lena lay in her king-sized bed, staring at the ceiling of the penthouse that no longer felt like a sanctuary. Her phone had been silent all day. No calls from friends, no social invitations, no texts. Even her social media had become toxic, with every post attracting cruel comments about her character. She thought about Nathan, probably sleeping in some cheap motel, and felt a mixture of disgust and recognition. They were both paying for their choices now, both discovering that actions had consequences they'd never considered. But while Nathan's punishment felt deserved, Lena was beginning to understand that her own consequences went deeper than social embarrassment. She was forced to confront the uncomfortable truth about who she really was, someone who had always believed her wealth and status made her better than other people, someone who had taken pride in winning a man away from another woman without ever considering that woman's humanity. 2 miles away, Natalie was putting the finishing touches on her tiny nursery, feeling practice contractions that reminded her birth was imminent. Her daughter would be born any day now into modest circumstances, but she would be surrounded by love and supported by a community that valued justice over wealth. As she felt another practice contraction, Natalie smiled and whispered to her belly, Almost time, little one. Your mama's ready to meet you. Outside her window, Pasadena slept under a canopy of stars. A city where 3 lives had been forever changed by choices made and consequences faced. The reckoning was almost complete. In his motel room, Nathan stared at his phone, fighting the urge to call Natalie and ask about the baby. In her penthouse, Lena wondered if she'd ever be able to show her face in polite society again. And in her small apartment, Natalie packed her hospital bag, ready to begin the next chapter of her life as a single mother who had finally learned to value herself. Natalie's water broke at 3:47 a.m. on the first Tuesday of February, right on her due date. She was folding the last of the baby clothes donated by her hospital colleagues when the sharp pain doubled her over, followed by the warm rush that meant her daughter was ready to meet the world. "It's time, baby girl," she whispered to her belly, reaching for her phone to call her mother. 4 hours later, Natalie was in the maternity ward of Pasadena General, surrounded by the same colleagues who had become her chosen family. Carol held her hand while Dr. Martinez monitored her progress, and Jessica paced the room like an expectant aunt. "You're doing amazing, sweetheart," Carol said, smoothing Natalie's hair as another contraction peaked. "Just think, by tonight you'll be holding your daughter." "Our daughter," Natalie corrected, then paused. "My daughter. Just mine." Meanwhile, Nathan was washing dishes in the back of Tony's Diner, a 24-hour restaurant that had finally hired him after 2 weeks of desperate searching. The pay was minimum wage, the work was humiliating for someone who had once worn designer suits, but it was the only place that didn't care about his reputation, as long as he stayed in the kitchen, away from customers. His phone buzzed in his pocket. The caller ID showed a number he recognized. Pasadena General Hospital. "Nathan Walsh?" The voice was professional, clinical. "This is the maternity ward. You're listed as the father of baby Dormer. The mother is in active labor." Nathan's hands shook as he held the phone. Is she okay?" "Both mother and baby are doing well. Labor is progressing normally. Are you planning to be present for the birth?" Nathan looked around the greasy kitchen, at the pile of dirty plates waiting to be washed, at the life he'd been reduced to. Then he thought about Natalie, alone in a hospital room, bringing their child into the world. Yes, I'm coming. Sir, visiting hours for the maternity ward require—" "I'm the father," Nathan said, surprising himself with the firmness in his voice. "I'll be there." He untied his apron and told his supervisor he had a family emergency, knowing he'd probably lose the job. But for the first time in months, something felt more important than his own survival. At 2:15 p.m. on February 4th, Emma Rose Dormer was born, weighing 6 pounds 3 ounces, with a full head of dark hair and her mother's determined chin. Natalie held her daughter for the first time and felt a love so fierce it took her breath away. "She's perfect," Jessica whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Look at those little fingers." Dr. Martinez smiled as he completed his examination. "Healthy in every way. You did beautifully, Natalie." As the medical team finished their procedures and left the room, Natalie was alone with her daughter for the first time. She traced Emma's tiny features with her finger, marveling at the miracle of this perfect little person. "Hi, baby," she whispered. "I'm your mama. I've been waiting so long to meet you." A soft knock at the door interrupted the moment. Carol looked up from where she'd been cooing over her granddaughter. "Come in," Natalie called, expecting another nurse. Instead, Nathan Walsh stepped into the room. He looked terrible, thinner than she remembered, wearing clothes that were clearly secondhand, his hair unwashed and his face haggard. But his eyes were fixed on the bundle in Natalie's arms with an expression of wonder and terror. The hospital called," he said quietly. "They said you were in labor." The room fell silent. Carol's expression hardened, and Jessica moved protectively closer to Natalie's bedside. "You can leave," Jessica said coldly. "She doesn't need you here." But Natalie surprised everyone, including herself. "It's okay," she said quietly. "He can stay for a minute." Nathan took a tentative step closer, his eyes never leaving the baby. She's your daughter," Natalie said simply. "Emma Rose." Nathan's legs seemed to give out, and he sank into the chair beside the bed. Up close, he could see Emma's tiny face, the way her small hand curled around Natalie's finger, the rise and fall of her miniature chest. "She's beautiful," he whispered, and for the first time since the wedding day, his voice cracked with genuine emotion. "She is," Natalie agreed, "and she's going to have a good life. I'll make sure of that." Nathan reached toward the baby instinctively, then stopped himself. Would it be okay if I—" Natalie studied his face for a long moment, seeing something she'd never seen before, genuine remorse mixed with wonder. Slowly, carefully, she adjusted Emma in her arms. "Support her head," she instructed, as Nathan's shaking hands received his daughter for the first time. The moment Emma settled into Nathan's arms, something fundamental shifted in the room. Nathan stared down at this tiny person, his daughter, and felt the full weight of what he'd abandoned, what he'd been running from, what he'd been too cowardly to face. "I'm sorry," he whispered, and it wasn't clear if he was talking to Emma or to Natalie. I'm so sorry. Sorry doesn't change anything, Carol said sharply. Where were you when Natalie was working double shifts pregnant? Where were you when she was throwing up every morning and still going to work? Mom, Natalie said gently, but her voice held steel. Let me handle this. Nathan looked up from Emma to meet Natalie's eyes. I know I can't undo what I did. I know I hurt you in ways I can't fix. You're right, you can't fix it. But I want to try to do right by her. Nathan continued, his voice growing stronger. By Emma, I want to be the father she deserves. Natalie was quiet for a long moment, studying the man who had shattered her life, who now held their daughter with such careful reverence. Being a father isn't about what you want, Nathan. It's about what she needs. It's about showing up even when it's hard. It's about putting her first always, no matter what it costs you. I know. I understand that now. Do you? Natalie's voice was sharper now. Because you've never put anyone first before. You've spent your entire adult life looking for the easy way out, the person who would make life comfortable for you. Nathan looked down at Emma, who had opened her eyes and seemed to be staring directly at him with that unfocused intensity of newborns. I don't know how to be different, he admitted, but I want to learn. For her. It's too late for us. Natalie said firmly. That door closed the day you chose Lena over our family. But Emma deserves to know her father. If you can prove you're capable of being one. What would that look like? Natalie thought carefully before answering. It looks like paying your child support on time. Every month, no matter what. It looks like showing up for scheduled visits even when you're tired or stressed or broke. It looks like putting her needs before your own convenience. And if I can do that, then maybe, eventually, you can have a relationship with your daughter. But you'll have to earn it, Nathan. Every single day. Nathan nodded, still holding Emma with the careful attention of someone handling something infinitely precious and fragile. I lost my job today, he said quietly. Coming here, I mean. But this was more important. For the first time since he'd entered the room, Natalie's expression softened slightly. That's a start. A knock at the door interrupted them. A nurse entered with paperwork for the birth certificate. We need the father's information, she said cheerfully, then paused as she took in the tension in the room. Natalie looked at Nathan, who was still holding Emma. Do you want your name on her birth certificate? Nathan's throat worked as he struggled with emotion. More than anything. Then you need to understand what that means. It means you're legally responsible for her. It means you can't run away when things get difficult. It means you're her father for better or worse for the next 18 years. I understand. Natalie nodded to the nurse. Put him down as the father. Nathan Walsh. As Nathan carefully handed Emma back to her mother, his phone buzzed with a text message. Without thinking, he glanced at it. It was from Lena. Saw the news about the baby. I hope you're finally ready to grow up. Nathan deleted the message without responding and turned his phone off entirely. For the first time in his adult life, he was exactly where he needed to be, focused on what mattered most. I should go, he said quietly. Let you rest. Nathan, Natalie called as he reached the door. The first child support payment is due Monday. $800. I'll find a way to get it. See that you do, because this isn't about you anymore. It's about her. Nathan paused at the door, looking back at Natalie holding their daughter. Thank you for letting me meet her, for putting my name on the birth certificate, for giving me a chance I don't deserve. I'm not doing it for you, Natalie said simply. I'm doing it for Emma. Every child deserves the chance to know their father, even if he has to learn how to be one. As Nathan left the hospital, walking out into the bright afternoon sunshine, he felt the weight of real responsibility for the first time in his life. He had a daughter now. He was a father. And for the first time since his world had collapsed, he had a purpose that was bigger than his own survival. Emma Rose Dormer had been in the world for 6 hours, and she had already changed everything. In her penthouse across town, Lena saw the news notification about the birth and felt a strange mixture of emotions she couldn't name. She had helped create the circumstances that led to Emma being born to a single mother, and now she would live with that knowledge forever. Monday morning arrived gray and cold, with the kind of March drizzle that made everything in Pasadena look washed out and tired. Nathan Walsh stood outside the courthouse at 8:47 a.m., 13 minutes before his child support payment was due, holding an envelope containing exactly $800 in cash. Getting that money had required swallowing what remained of his pride. After losing his dishwashing job for leaving during his shift, he'd spent the weekend doing whatever work he could find, moving furniture for cash, cleaning gutters, even standing outside a hardware store offering to load purchases for tips. By Sunday night, he had $743. The remaining $57 had come from pawning his watch, the expensive timepiece Natalie had given him for his birthday 2 years ago, bought with money from her emergency fund. Mr. Walsh? The family court clerk barely looked up as Nathan approached the window. First payment? Yes, ma'am. Nathan slid the envelope across the counter, along with the required paperwork. The clerk counted the money with practiced efficiency. This covers March. April payment is due by the 15th. You understand that late payments result in additional fees and potential wage garnishment? I understand. As Nathan left the courthouse, his phone buzzed with a text from Peter Dinklage. Payment received. First installment of restitution, $2,100, due Friday. We'll be monitoring compliance closely. Nathan stared at the message. Even with finding more work, he had maybe 2 weeks before he'd be completely broke again. But he'd made a promise to Emma, and for the first time in his life, keeping a promise mattered more than his own comfort. Across town, Lena Headey was packing designer clothes into boxes, preparing for a move she'd never imagined she'd have to make. The penthouse that had been her sanctuary was being sold, part of her family's strategy to reduce expenses and distance themselves from the scandal that continued to follow them. The realtor says we should get asking price, her mother Margaret said, supervising the packing with tired eyes. The view alone is worth the premium. Where will I go? Lena asked, folding a dress that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Your Aunt Patricia has a guest house in San Diego. You can stay there while you figure things out. The euphemism hung in the air. While you wait for people to forget, while you rebuild your reputation, while you become someone who doesn't remind everyone of the worst scandal in recent Pasadena memory. What about therapy? Lena asked quietly. She'd been seeing a counselor since the breakdown, trying to understand how she'd become someone capable of helping destroy a family. Dr. Morrison recommended someone in San Diego, someone who specializes in— Margaret paused, choosing her words carefully. People who need to learn empathy. The phrase stung because it was true. Lena was learning, slowly and painfully, to understand how her actions had affected real people with real feelings. The process was excruciating, but necessary. I want to do something, Lena said suddenly. Before I leave, I want to make amends somehow. Margaret looked at her daughter with a mixture of surprise and cautious hope. What did you have in mind? Meanwhile, Natalie was adjusting to life as a new mother with the fierce determination that had carried her through the past year. Emma was 3 weeks old, sleeping peacefully in the crib donated by her hospital colleagues, while Natalie organized the mountain of legal paperwork that had accumulated. Peter Dinklage sat at her small dining table, updating her on Nathan's compliance with the court orders. He made the first payment on time, Peter reported. Cash, exact amount. And I have to say, he looked like he'd been through hell to get it. Good, Natalie said without sympathy. Maybe struggling for money will teach him what I went through for 4 years. There's something else, Peter continued. Lena Headey's attorney contacted me. She wants to make a financial settlement. Personal accountability, separate from Nathan's obligations. Natalie looked up from the baby clothes she was folding. What kind of settlement? $25,000. No strings attached. No admission of legal guilt. Her attorney called it moral restitution. Natalie was quiet for a long moment, processing this unexpected development. She doesn't owe me money legally. No, but morally, Peter shrugged. Maybe she's finally understanding the cost of her choices. What would you advise? Take it, Peter said immediately. You've got 18 years of raising Emma ahead of you, plus college to think about. That money could go into an education fund, give her opportunities you couldn't provide otherwise. That afternoon, Natalie received an unexpected visitor. Lena Headey stood at her door, looking nothing like the confident woman who had once posed on social media with Nathan. She was thinner, her designer clothes replaced by simple jeans and a sweater, her hair pulled back in a plain ponytail. I don't expect you to let me in, Lena said quietly, but I wanted to deliver this personally. She handed Natalie an envelope. It's a cashier's check for $25,000. For Emma's future. Natalie took the envelope but didn't open it. Why? Because I helped ruin your life, and money is the only way I know how to try to fix things. Lena's voice was steady, but small. Because I spent more than that on clothes and dinners while you were working overtime pregnant. This doesn't change what you did. I know. Nothing can change that. But maybe it can help ensure that Emma has opportunities that my selfishness almost took away. Natalie studied Lena's face, seeing something she'd never seen before. Genuine remorse. I've been going to therapy, Lena continued, learning about empathy, about how my actions affect other people. It's harder than I thought it would be. Good. It should be hard. I'm moving to San Diego next week, starting over, trying to become someone who doesn't cause pain to other people. Lena took a shaky breath. I wanted you to know that what happened to you changed me, made me see who I really was, and I didn't like what I saw. Natalie was quiet for a long moment. I hope you figure it out. I hope you become someone better. I'm trying. Every day. Lena turned to leave, then paused. Is she healthy? The baby? Her name is Emma. And yes, she's perfect. Emma, Lena repeated softly. That's a beautiful name. After Lena left, Natalie sat in her living room holding the check, processing the surreal conversation. Her phone buzzed with a text from Nathan. Found more work. Landscaping crew. Hard physical labor but honest pay. We'll have restitution payment Friday. She stared at the message for a long time. Nathan was actually working, actually trying to meet his obligations. It didn't forgive the past, but it was more than she'd expected from him. 3 months later, Nathan stood in the lobby of a small apartment building in a working-class neighborhood, holding the key to a studio apartment he'd managed to rent after saving every penny from his landscaping job. It wasn't much, a single room with a kitchenette and a pull-out couch, but it was his, and more importantly, it was clean and safe enough for supervised visits with Emma. His phone rang. Natalie's number. Hello? Nathan? It's time for you to meet your daughter properly. Can you come over this afternoon? Nathan's heart hammered in his chest. Yes, absolutely. Should I bring anything? Just yourself. And Nathan, you'll need to take a parenting class if you want regular visitation. I've already researched programs. I'll sign up today. Good. Emma deserves a father who knows what he's doing. That evening, Nathan sat in Natalie's living room, holding 3-month-old Emma, while Natalie explained feeding schedules and diaper changes. Emma had grown since the hospital, becoming more alert, more responsive. When she looked at Nathan with her wide, curious eyes, he felt that same overwhelming sense of purpose he'd experienced the day she was born. She's incredible, he whispered as Emma grasped his finger with her tiny hand. She is, Natalie agreed. And she's going to grow up knowing that her father worked hard to be part of her life, even when it was difficult. I won't let her down, Nathan said, and for the first time in his life he meant a promise completely. See that you don't, because this is your only chance, Nathan. There won't be another one. As Nathan walked home that night, carrying the memory of Emma's laugh and the weight of his new responsibilities, he passed the country club where he'd once felt so important, so successful. Through the windows, he could see well-dressed people enjoying dinners that cost more than he made in a week. But for the first time since leaving that life behind, he didn't feel envious. He felt grateful. Grateful for work that was honest, for an apartment that was his, for a daughter who might one day respect the man he was becoming, instead of the man he'd been. The road to redemption was long and difficult, paid for in sweat and sacrifice rather than charm and connections. But it was the first real thing Nathan Walsh had ever built with his own hands. And it was enough. In San Diego, Lena was learning to live without privilege, working as a receptionist in a non-profit clinic, and attending therapy twice a week. In Pasadena, Natalie was thriving as a single mother, supported by a community that had rallied around her cause. And somewhere between those two cities, Nathan was discovering that earning respect was harder than inheriting it, and infinitely more valuable. 5 years later, the autumn sun filtered through the windows of Natalie's small but comfortable house, the same house she'd bought with a combination of her savings, the restitution money, and Lena's settlement. 5-year-old Emma Rose Dormer sat at the kitchen table, carefully coloring a picture of a family for her kindergarten assignment, her tongue sticking out in concentration. "Mama, does my daddy have to work on Saturdays?" Emma asked, not looking up from her drawing. "Sometimes, sweetheart," Natalie replied, packing Emma's lunch for school. "Daddy works very hard to take care of you." It was true. Nathan had been consistent with his child support for 5 years straight, never missing a payment, never late. The landscaping business he'd started with a partner had grown modestly but steadily, and he'd even managed to move from the studio apartment to a small 2-bedroom house where Emma had her own room for weekend visits. "Can we visit Daddy's work today? I like watching him plant flowers." Natalie smiled. Emma adored her father, and Nathan had proven himself worthy of that adoration. He'd completed not just the required parenting classes, but had taken additional courses in child development. He'd never missed a school play, a parent-teacher conference, or a soccer game. The man who had once run from responsibility had become the most dependable person in Emma's life, besides Natalie herself. "We'll see him this afternoon, baby. He's taking you to the park, remember?" The doorbell rang and Emma jumped up excitedly. "Daddy!" Nathan stood on the front porch, wearing work clothes but clean and pressed, holding a small bouquet of sunflowers, Emma's favorite. At 39, he looked older but healthier than he had 5 years ago. The soft living with Lena had been replaced by the lean muscle of physical work and the quiet confidence of a man who'd earned everything he had. "There's my princess." Nathan scooped Emma up, spinning her around as she giggled. "Ready for our adventure? I drew you a picture." Emma ran to get her artwork, leaving Natalie and Nathan alone for a moment. "How's business?" Natalie asked. Their relationship had evolved into something cordial, professional, focused entirely on Emma's well-being. "Good. We landed the contract for the new medical complex downtown. Should keep us busy through next summer." Nathan paused. "I wanted to thank you again for letting me take Emma to my mom's next weekend. She's been wanting to meet her granddaughter for years. Your mother seems lovely from our phone calls. I'm glad Emma will have that relationship." It had taken Nathan 2 years to rebuild his relationship with his own family, to earn back their trust and respect. His parents had been devastated by his actions, but seeing their son actually take responsibility and work to become a better man had slowly healed those wounds. Emma returned with her drawing, stick figures labeled Mama, Daddy, and me, standing in front of a house with a big yellow sun overhead. "That's beautiful, Princess," Nathan said, studying the drawing seriously. "Can I keep this one?" "Yes, but Mama gets to keep the other pictures." As Nathan and Emma left for their afternoon together, Natalie watched from the window. Emma skipped between them, holding both their hands, chattering about school and friends and the butterfly she'd seen in the garden. It wasn't the family Natalie had once imagined, but it was a good family, built on honesty, respect, and putting Emma's needs first. Her phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Martinez. "Lunch tomorrow? I have news about the promotion." Natalie smiled. 3 years ago, she'd been promoted to head nurse of the ICU, a position that came with better pay, better hours, and the respect of her colleagues. She'd also started dating Dr. Martinez 6 months ago, slowly, carefully, with Emma's approval. He was kind, stable, and treated Emma like she was precious. Everything Nathan had never been. Across the state in San Diego, Lena Hetty, now calling herself Lena Matthews, having legally changed her name, finished her shift at the community health clinic where she worked as a patient advocate. It wasn't glamorous work, and the pay was modest, but it was meaningful in a way her old life had never been. She'd been in therapy for 5 years, working through the entitled mindset that had allowed her to help destroy a family without considering the human cost. The process had been painful but necessary. She was a different person now, someone who thought about consequences, who considered other people's feelings, who understood that wealth without character was worthless. She'd never married, never had children. Part of her punishment was living with the knowledge that her actions had contributed to a child growing up in a broken home, even though that child was now thriving despite, or perhaps because of, the challenges. Sometimes late at night, Lena wondered what her life would have been like if she'd been a better person 5 years ago, if she'd walked away when she learned Nathan had left someone at the altar, if she'd encouraged him to do the right thing instead of celebrating his intelligent choice. But those were thoughts for dark moments. Most days she focused on the work, helping people navigate the healthcare system, advocating for patients who couldn't advocate for themselves, using her education and resources to actually help people instead of just accumulating status symbols. It was a smaller life than the one she'd planned, but it was an honest one. And slowly, carefully, she was building something that couldn't be taken away by scandal or shame, genuine self-respect. Back in Pasadena, Nathan pushed Emma on the swing set at their favorite park, listening to her laugh with the pure joy that only children possess. Other parents at the park knew him as Emma's dad, a good father who showed up consistently, who clearly adored his daughter, who worked hard to provide for her. They didn't know about his past, about the man he'd been before Emma changed everything, and that was fine with Nathan. He wasn't that person anymore. "Higher, Daddy! Higher!" Emma called out, her hair flying in the wind. "Hold on tight, Princess." As the swing reached its peak, Emma let out a squeal of delight that made Nathan's heart soar. This moment, this relationship, this chance to be the father Emma deserved, was worth more than all the luxury he'd once chased. It was worth the years of physical labor, the small apartment, the careful budgeting of every dollar. His phone buzzed with a text from his business partner. Henderson Group wants to bid on their new headquarters landscaping. Big job if we can land it. Nathan smiled, remembering the Henderson Group, the same company that had exposed his incompetence at Heady Construction 5 years ago. Now he'd have a chance to prove himself through honest work and genuine expertise, not charm and connections. That evening, as Nathan walked Emma back to Natalie's house, his daughter chattered about her day, her plans for the weekend, her hopes for her upcoming birthday party. "Daddy, will you always be my daddy?" she asked suddenly, with the seriousness that sometimes overtook 5-year-olds. "Forever and always, princess. Nothing will ever change that." "Good, because I love you." "I love you too, Emma, more than anything in the world." As they reached Natalie's front door, Emma hugged Nathan tightly around the legs before running inside to tell her mother about their adventures. Natalie appeared in the doorway, and for a moment, she and Nathan just looked at each other. Two people who had been through hell together and somehow found their way to something better. "Thank you," Nathan said quietly, "for giving me the chance to be her father, for holding me accountable, for making me become someone worthy of her love." "You earned it," Natalie replied. "Every single day you earned it." As Nathan drove home to his small house, he passed the country club where he'd once felt so important, so successful. The same people were probably inside, having the same expensive dinners, making the same shallow conversation. But Nathan didn't feel envious anymore. He felt grateful, grateful for work that was honest, grateful for a daughter who loved him, grateful for a second chance he'd almost thrown away, grateful for the woman who'd forced him to become a man worthy of the title, father. The road to redemption had been long and difficult, paved with humility and sacrifice rather than privilege and shortcuts. But it had led him to something more valuable than all the luxury he'd once pursued: the respect of his daughter, the trust of the woman he'd wronged, the knowledge that he'd finally become someone worth being. And in a small house in Pasadena, as Emma Rose Dormer drifted off to sleep surrounded by pictures of the father who came to every soccer game and the mother who'd fought for her before she was even born, the last chapter of this story was being written, not with revenge or retribution, but with love, growth, and the radical idea that people can change if they're willing to pay the price. Some endings aren't happy, some are just honest. And sometimes, that's enough. The end final message. In a world where actions often seem to have no consequences, where wealth and status can shield people from accountability, this story reminds us that truth has its own power, that dignity earned through struggle is worth more than comfort stolen from others, that children deserve parents who fight for them, not parents who run from them, and that sometimes, the most profound victory isn't revenge, it's watching someone you loved finally become someone worthy of love. I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, please leave a like to help me out, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on the next stories. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.